Those rags you call clothes aren't even fit for my dog to sleep on. That's what I heard from my daughter-in-law at a family lunch. What she didn't know was that the world turns, and her world was about to come crashing down. My name is Roselli. I'm 61 years old, and that day, during a visit to my son's fancy house, I came home devastated by that comment. But my daughter-in-law's world collapsed within 24 hours. It was a Saturday with strong sunshine. One of those days of white light that slips through every crack and warms your face inside the car before you even notice. The Uber dropped me off on the sidewalk in front of their house, a large corner house with a neatly trimmed front garden and a black iron gate that gleamed against the morning sun. I had arrived with my potato salad in a dish covered with aluminum foil, plus 2 wrapped gifts I had prepared carefully the day before, each one with a ribbon tied on top, a shirt for my son Thomas, and a floral dress for my daughter-in-law Talia. I had sewn both of them with my own hands. I didn't know yet that it was exactly that which would give everyone something to talk about. Sewing has been my calling for as long as I can remember. I learned from my mother when I was around 12. She made everything, from christening outfits to square dance dresses, from cloth napkins to living room curtains, and I would stand beside her at the machine, learning every stitch. I'd ask to try, I'd make mistakes, I'd pull out the thread, I'd try again. I don't remember being bothered by it even once. It was as if the sound of the machine calmed me in a way that needed no explanation. After I grew up, I never stopped. I made clothes for my family for years, worked with sewing, built up a small clientele here and there, and I still take orders today from people who know me and know my work. Some people look at that with the expression of someone being polite, while inwardly thinking it amounts to very little. I've noticed that more than once in my life, but I'm not the least bit ashamed. I think sewing is one of the few things that still makes me feel completely whole, after everything I've been through. I've been a widow for 2 years, since Nestor left me. It's hard to explain what a house is like after the person who lived in it is gone. Nothing changes in the furniture, nothing changes in the walls, but everything changes in the air. There's a blue cup with a white rim still on the kitchen shelf, the one he used every day before leaving for work. I've never had the heart to take it down. Sometimes in the morning, I look at it without meaning to, just for a second, and I stop, hand on the coffee maker, thoughts halted midway. Then I pour my coffee and go on with the day. I learn to hold my ground alone, and that I've always known how to do. Thomas, my son, was Nestor's pride, and mine too, of course. He grew up studious and dedicated, a boy who took school seriously without me needing to hover. He studied civil engineering at a good university, graduated, and was already employed at a large construction company. From there, it moved quickly. He built experience, built connections, built confidence, until one day he came to tell me he was going to open his own construction company. Talia's family had put in the capital to get the business off the ground. At the time, I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a close family coming together in support. It was only later that I came to understand the weight that carried for both of them. He met Talia 5 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. She had been passing through, come to attend a fashion show. When Thomas told me about her, his eyes had that shine I knew well from when he was small, the same shine as when he got something he'd wanted very much and couldn't hide it. I was happy for him. I wanted him to be happy above anything else, and that looked like happiness. They married 3 years ago in a beautiful ceremony, full of people, with a generous table and live musicians. I remember looking at Thomas at the altar and thinking of Nestor, how proud he would have been there, that restrained smile he had when something good happened to his son, that way of trying not to show how moved he was. I remember us dancing at a neighborhood party years ago when he stepped on my feet twice, trying to look like he knew what he was doing. Forgive me. Sometimes I get lost in memories along the way. I can't help it. The first time Talia came to visit me, I made an orange cake and set the table with the embroidered tablecloth I keep for special guests. She came in, greeted me with a polite smile, and remained standing. I offered coffee. She said no. I offered juice. Also, no. I thought it was shyness because some people take time to feel comfortable in a new place. But it wasn't shyness. It was that look of someone evaluating every detail before deciding what they think. Each piece of furniture, each picture, each handmade piece on the wall. Evaluating and filing it away in silence, slowly. Over the time that followed, I came to understand her better. She was never rude to me, never raised her voice, never reached the point of being directly offensive. It was more subtle than that. It was the little laugh that came after a specific question. It was the compliment that, when you stopped to think about it, wasn't quite a compliment. It was the joke that had a second layer she pretended wasn't there. These things accumulated in a way I wasn't intentionally storing. They just stayed, the way all small things stay when you can't quite throw them away. She had come from a wealthy family. That was clear in everything she did, in the way she greeted people, in the places she frequented, in the way she looked at whatever she didn't recognize as part of her world. Not that there was anything wrong with that in itself, but there was in her that tendency to measure everything by the ruler she knew. And my ruler was very different from hers. That difference, I came to notice gradually, bothered her more than she let on. There was one time, a few months before that Saturday lunch, that became clearer to me than any moment before it. Thomas had invited me to dinner at their house on a Sunday evening. Just the three of us, no other guests, a simple dinner. I arrived wearing a blouse I had sewn myself that week, blue, good quality jersey, with a small embroidery on the cuff that I had done carefully using thicker thread to give it volume. Something simple, but well made. I felt good in it. We sat down to dinner. The conversation flowed easily, Thomas talking about work, Talia speaking about a trip she had planned with a friend for the following month. At a certain point, she looked at me with that smile she had when she was observing something and said, "What a cute blouse, Rosalie." I thanked her, pleased with the compliment. She tilted her head to one side, just for a second, that pause she had of someone calculating, and added, "You made it yourself, didn't you?" I said yes. She gave a soft little laugh and turned her gaze back to her plate as if the subject were finished. Thomas changed the subject immediately, with the naturalness of someone trying to cover a crack before anyone looks directly at it. And the conversation moved on as if nothing had happened. But that little laugh stayed with me on the Uber ride home. I turned it over the whole way back. It wasn't what she had said. She had said nothing wrong, technically. It was what was underneath what she had said. It was that fraction of a second between the question and the comment, where she had already decided what she thought before she even heard my answer. As if asking were just a formality because the conclusion had already been formed well before that. I got home, took off the blouse and stood looking at it for a moment. The embroidery on the cuff, the small stitches made with thicker thread to give a pretty volume. I folded it and put it in the drawer. I went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the floor. That pressure of having sat there smiling, not quite knowing what to do with what I was feeling. I spent weeks convincing myself I was being too sensitive. After all, she hadn't said anything wrong. She had only smiled. She had only asked. I told myself it was in my head, that the woman probably meant no harm, that I was looking for a problem where there wasn't one. I kept believing that with a firmness that, looking back, feels more like effort than conviction. But I did. I kept believing it right up until that sunny Saturday showed me what was underneath all those little laughs. While all of this was happening over those months, I wondered how many people go through something like this in silence. How many mothers stay quiet at a table because they've learned that the noise they make bothers people more than their silence does. How many 60-year-old women with hands calloused from honest work swallow one joke a week and think they're exaggerating, when they're not exaggerating at all. But let me tell you how that Saturday went, from the beginning. The evening before the lunch, I woke up before daylight, even before my alarm, because that's how it was when I was preparing something for someone. My body would wake on its own. I went slowly to the kitchen, heated the water for coffee, and began separating the ingredients for the salad. Potato, carrot, mayonnaise, hard-boiled egg, the pinch of salt I know by heart without measuring, because I learned by eye, not by recipe. Thomas had said he was missing my potato salad when he called with the invitation, and that had made me feel good. I liked when he asked for things like that. Simple things, homemade things, that reminded me I still had a place in his world. While the potato was cooking, I went to the sewing machine to check the gifts one last time before wrapping them. I had sewn both of them calmly over the course of that week. Thomas's shirt first, which was simpler, striped, white with light blue, the kind he likes, a small chest pocket, firm stitch, careful finishing. Talia's dress had taken me more work, but it had come out beautifully. Floral, a small print of flowers in shades of green and yellow, short sleeves, a slightly flared skirt that moved nicely when you walked. I folded both carefully, wrapped them, tied the ribbons into neat little bows on top. I left them on the machine so I wouldn't forget them in the morning. I made the salad while the morning was still early, with the kitchen window open and the breeze coming in. I assembled everything with care, each layer in the right place, the seasoning measured the way I knew would taste good. I tasted, adjusted the salt, covered it with plastic wrap, and put it in the refrigerator. I spent the afternoon finishing an alteration for a client that was waiting. In the evening, I ate lightly, took an early bath, went to bed. I was mildly looking forward to the lunch the next day. Not overly so, because I never quite know what to expect when I go to their house, but looking forward to it all the same, in the way you do when you're about to see your child. The next day, I dressed carefully. I put on the linen beige dress I had sewn myself the previous fall. Simple, well-fitted, the kind that doesn't draw too much attention, but that you know is well made. I keep it for occasions that call for a little more care. I took the dish from the refrigerator, covered it carefully so as not to crumple the foil, picked up the 2 wrapped gifts with their ribbons, and called an Uber. The driver was quiet the whole way, which suited me. I looked out the window, watching the Saturday morning outside. The bakeries open, people with bags in hand, children on the sidewalk. The morning light was that good weekend light, slower than a weekday morning. When the Uber stopped on the sidewalk in front of their house, I stepped out slowly, held the dish with both arms, the wrapped gifts resting on my forearm. Before pressing the buzzer, I paused for a second and looked at the front of the house. My son had built that. That quiet pride you carry for your child moved through my chest as I reached out my finger to the intercom. Thomas opened the gate. He received me with a tight hug, took the dish from my hands with a genuine smile of gratitude, nuzzled my cheek the way he had since he was a child. That thing a son does who never lost the habit. But there was something in his manner, a tension underneath the casualness, a way of holding his shoulders, a gaze that wouldn't settle in one place. He asked what those wrapped gifts were that I was still holding. I said, it was a surprise. He smiled. The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Inside, a couple of friends were already in the living room, Michael and Joyce, well-dressed, relaxed, talking about something with the ease of people accustomed to moving through spaces like that one. Thomas introduced me. They were warm. Joyce had an animated way of talking that seemed genuine. Talia was still getting ready. After some time, she came down, navy blue dress, hair up in a neat bun, wine-colored lipstick just right. She greeted everyone with that natural ease she had, that ability to move among people as if the whole world were home to her. She looked at me with a polite smile, greeted me with an air kiss. We went to the table. The lunch was delicious. Cold cuts to start, tender roast beef, fluffy rice, vegetables, and my potato salad in the middle of the table, which Joyce praised as soon as she served herself. What a great potato salad, Roselli. That felt good. The conversation flowed, relaxed. Joyce told of a recent trip she'd taken. Michael spoke of a new project. Thomas gradually unwound, that shoulder tension letting go a little. I was well. Up to that moment, I was genuinely well. Then Joyce turned to Talia and asked, "Have you been going to the shows?" And Talia smiled in that way of hers, ironic, slightly superior, the smile of someone who knows more than they're going to say, and replied, "What for? Fashion is drowning in fashion." The two of them laughed, and Thomas looked at me with that warmth of a son who wants to include his mother in the conversation and said, "Mom, speaking of fashion, do you still sew? I remember you used to make my shorts, some shirts too." I said yes. I mentioned that the dress I was wearing I had made myself, and I said I had brought two gifts, a shirt for him and a dress for Talia. The table fell into one of those brief silences when everyone is waiting to see what comes next. It wasn't long. Just enough time for Talia to turn to me with the same smile she'd carried to the table and say out loud, without a moment's hesitation, "Those rags you call clothes aren't even fit for my dog to sleep on." And she laughed. Joyce went still. Michael lowered his eyes to his plate. Thomas said, in a tense voice trying to disguise itself, "Talia, please, come on." And she, still smiling, as someone who considers that easy banter, added, "It's a joke. Your mom knows. I know." I knew exactly what that was. I didn't respond. I lowered my eyes to my plate and finished my meal in silence. I picked up my utensils again, served myself more of my own salad, ate slowly. The food was good, but I was no longer able to taste any of it. Around me, the sounds of the table continued. Someone said something, someone answered. The conversation resumed its course the way water flows around a stone without lingering. No one touched the subject again. Lunch went on, finished, coffee was served. I stayed until the end, without saying more than what was necessary. When I went to say goodbye, Thomas walked me to the gate. Before I left, he put his hand on my shoulder, looked at me for a second with those eyes that since he was a boy had never been able to lie to me properly, and said quietly, "Mom, I'm sorry. For everything." He paused for a long moment. Then he added, "I need to go back to the office today. There's something I need to sort out." The way he said it didn't sound like ordinary work urgency. It sounded like someone carrying something heavy they don't yet know how to put down. That voice of someone who already knows they're going to have to put it down, just not yet. I told him everything was fine, not to worry about me. I called an Uber. In the Uber on the way back, I looked at the seat beside me. The little bag with the floral dress I had made for Talia was still there. I hadn't had the heart to give it to her. I hadn't even tried. The car moved in silence, the driver's eyes fixed ahead, and I kept looking at that wrapped gift with the folded pink ribbon. Thinking about how many hours I had spent at the machine sewing it, choosing the print, checking the fit. Thinking about how much I had still, even after everything that had happened at that table, wanted her to like it. I couldn't let go of that thought. I got home, put the little bag on top of the sewing machine, and took my shoes off at the door. I went to the kitchen, tried to make tea, put the kettle on the stove, but the water hadn't even boiled before I'd turned off the burner and walked away. I turned off the light and went to the bedroom. That kind of tiredness that isn't in the body. It's in the soul. It's in that deep place that has no name. Doesn't get resolved with dinner or a bath. I lay down on the bed. The ceiling was large for a long time before I closed my eyes. The next morning I woke up slowly, without rushing. The bed was comfortable, the quiet was comfortable, but I got up anyway because lying in bed with heavy thoughts doesn't help anything. I had my coffee alone, sitting at the table looking out at the small backyard through the window. The sun was different, softer, without that intensity of the day before that makes everything feel more exposed than it is. Nestor's blue cup was on the shelf as always. I looked at it for a second before pouring mine. Then I took the leftover bread and ate it without rushing. I went to the sewing machine after coffee because that was what I knew how to do when my head was full. I had a pair of trousers for a client that I needed to finish. The hem was only halfway done. It needed adjustments to the length. I sat down, turned on the machine, placed the piece under the needle. The little bag with the floral dress was on top of the machine, exactly as I had left it the night before. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it for a second, the way you look at something that's waiting to be resolved, but the time hasn't come yet, and went back to what I was doing. The machine went. I went with it. There's something in the rhythm of sewing, that regular mechanical sound going back and forth in a steady beat, that gets me moving even when my head doesn't want to. I finished the trousers, checked the stitch, folded the piece carefully. The work came out well. The morning passed like that, piece by piece, without asking more of me than I was giving. At noon, I stopped for lunch. I warmed up what was in the refrigerator, ate at the table looking out at the backyard. In the afternoon, I went back to the machine. There was another piece waiting, a little girl's blouse that the mother had brought in for sleeve adjustments. I took a phone call from an acquaintance who wanted to know the price of a trouser alteration. I wrote it down in my notebook, said I'd call back to confirm. The afternoon went on. The little bag with the dress stayed there beside the machine, and I couldn't help glancing at it every now and then, a second here, a second there, without meaning to, without being able to stop. It was nearly dark when the phone rang again. I was just finishing putting away the day's materials, folding the fabric scraps, turning off the machine. The call was from Thomas. Even before he spoke, I knew something had happened. There's a voice you recognize in your child. It's not the everyday voice. It's not the voice of when he's tired or in a hurry. It's a deeper, slower voice, as if each word weighs more than usual to get out, as if the space between words has grown longer. Thomas spoke and I listened, sitting in the small chair beside the sewing machine with my hand closed around the phone. He told me that federal agents had shown up at the construction company that morning, overbilling on public contracts, a scheme he had walked into with open eyes, thinking he was protected by the right people, the right connections, the money that circulated in that world. He said he had signed documents knowing what he was signing, that he thought it was safe, that he thought it would never reach him. And he said that with the clarity of someone seeing themselves from the outside for the first time. It reached him. Within hours, everything was frozen. Bank accounts, properties, vehicles, investments. His name had appeared in the news that same afternoon. Talia had been called in as well because some assets were registered in her name. And her family, the same ones who had put in the capital to open the construction company, the same ones I had thought were a close family coming together in support, were being investigated alongside them. Each one trying to resolve their own situation. No outstretched hand from her family at that moment. Thomas told me he had tried to reach 2 business partners, close friends, people who had been at their house every week and were called family in the good times. No one answered. Those who did answer said they couldn't get involved. The world they had built together over years, dinners, trips, celebrations, people who appeared in every photo, closed its doors in less than a day, as if it had never existed, as if all of it had been built on something that wasn't solid. Thomas cried on the phone. I can't remember the last time I heard my son cry like that, with that deep chest crying of a man who has nowhere left to put what he's feeling, his voice breaking as he tries to speak, and he can't stop it. He said he didn't know what to do. He said when he got home the cars had already been taken, the cards blocked. He said they were cooperating with the authorities, that there was a possibility of remaining free while the case moved forward. And he said the only thing they had let Talia take from the house was her little dog. While he talked, I sat looking at the sewing machine in front of me, at the little bag beside it, with the pink ribbon still folded. And I thought something strange. I didn't think about Talia. I didn't think about what she had said on Saturday. I thought about my son, about the boy who had learned to walk in this same house, who had done his math homework at this same table. And I thought that sometimes people make so many wrong turns that they reach the bottom at a speed they don't even notice while they're falling. When he finished, I asked only one question. Are you okay? He took a moment. He said he was physically fine, that they were cooperating with the authorities, that there was a possibility of remaining free. He paused for a long time and began. Mom, we don't have... I didn't let him finish. What do you mean you don't have anywhere to stay? Come here. We have the guest room. You'll stay here as long as you need. He was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, in that voice I recognized from the boy he had been, that voice from when he needed me, and didn't quite know how to ask, "Are you sure, Mom?" I said yes. I hung up the phone. I sat still for a moment, with the phone in my hand, looking at the sewing machine in front of me, at the little bag with the floral dress beside it. Then I got up, went to the hallway, opened the door to the guest room. I turned on the light. The room was in order. The bed made with the beige comforter, the wardrobe against the wall, the window with the curtain I had sewn myself that year. I went to the wardrobe and opened it. Inside were Nestor's clothes. Some shirts folded carefully, 2 pairs of trousers, a winter coat he'd rarely worn. I had been putting off donating them more times than I could count. Every time the moment came, I would open that door and stand there, unable to take the step. That night, I took everything out carefully, folded it on the bed. I thought Thomas could wear whatever fit. Then I went to the sewing machine, picked up the little bag with the floral dress, and brought it back to the guest room. I placed the bag on the bed, beside Nestor's clothes, the same dress she had called a rag that Saturday at noon. I turned off the light and closed the door. I stood outside for a second, hand still on the doorframe. It wasn't anger. It wasn't calculation. It wasn't planning anything. It was a quiet clarity, the kind that has no name, but that you recognize when it arrives. Like when the milk turns and you know before you smell it. When the Uber stopped in front of the house, they both got out together. Thomas was wearing the clothes on his back, the same shirt from the previous day's lunch, slightly wrinkled. A wallet in his pocket. Nothing else. Talia, with red eyes, her hair loose and untended, no lipstick, none of what had been there the Saturday before. He was carrying the little dog. A small animal, white, with long fur and a yellow bow on its head that looked out of place in that moment no matter what. When he stepped out of the car, he passed the dog to Talia, who held her pressed tightly against her chest with both hands, the way you hold the only thing that's left. Because she was the only thing that was left. Talia looked at me on the doorstep without being able to speak. I opened the door wider and said, "Come in and make yourselves at home. I'm getting dinner ready." She walked in slowly, looking around my house in a way that was completely different from every other time she had been here. It was no longer that evaluating look of someone analyzing and filing away. It was something else. It was the look of someone seeing for the first time what had always been in front of her eyes without her ever having stopped to truly look. I warmed dinner, rice, beans, chicken I had in the refrigerator, a quick salad made with what I had on hand. I set the table for the 3 of us. The little dog stayed quietly at Talia's feet the whole time, as if she too knew it wasn't a moment for noise. Little was said during dinner. Thomas ate with his head down. Talia barely touched her plate, moving the food around without really eating, with that look of someone whose stomach is locked up with worry, who can't swallow anything but the weight of their own situation. After dinner, Thomas stayed telling me more, with the voice of someone who needs to talk in order to sort out what they're feeling. The business partners who had vanished, the friends who wouldn't answer the phone, the people who had been in their house for years, Friday night dinners, Saturday barbecues, birthdays where they showed up with expensive wine and smiling for photos. Nobody. His voice kept getting quieter as he talked, as if losing breath as the list grew longer. Talia stayed silent the whole time, looking at the tablecloth. Later, when Thomas had already gone to the bedroom, Talia sat in the living room. I passed by her on the way to turn off the kitchen light and put away what was left of dinner. She said quietly, almost without a voice, like someone who isn't sure they'll be heard, "My family can't help either. They're in the middle of this too." I stopped. I looked at her. I said, "Thomas told me, Talia. Don't worry. It's all going to work out." She was quiet for a moment, looking at her hands. Then she looked at me with eyes full of tears and asked, in that voice of someone who has just realized something they hadn't been expecting, something that hadn't fit into any plan, "The floral dress on the bed. Did you put it there?" I said yes. She lowered her head and cried. Not the restrained crying of someone trying to hold it in. It was the crying of someone who has no strength left for anything, who had stayed firm until they simply couldn't anymore. When she managed to speak, she said, "Thank you so much, Rosalie. You were the only one who helped us. Everyone else left." I stepped closer, put my arms around her and said, "It's all right, sweetheart. Everything falls back into place, you'll see. Everything falls back into place." She cried a little more. I let her. I held on while she needed it. I didn't say anything more after that, because sometimes there's nothing to say, and any word you add only fills the silence with noise where none is needed. After that, she went to the bedroom. I turned off the living room light, went to my room, and lay down. The house was quiet in a way that was different from that night after the previous Saturday. It wasn't the empty silence of when you're alone with a weight you don't know where to put. It was the silence of when other people are sleeping under the same roof as you. It has a different volume, a different temperature. The next morning I woke up before anyone else, still dark outside. I went slowly down the hallway so as not to make noise, went into the kitchen, heated the water for coffee. I set the table with a care I hadn't even expected to. Cups, sugar bowl, the small dessert plates I keep for when there's someone in the house and that sit untouched on the shelf week after week. Then I slipped out quickly for what was a short walk to the bakery on the corner. Fresh bread, that smell of an early morning bakery that nothing else in the world replaces. On the way back, I stopped at the corner store and picked up a small bag of dog food for the little dog. I was back before anyone came down. I put the bread on the table, set out the food in a small bowl I set aside for that purpose in the corner of the kitchen. I poured my coffee, sat down, waited. There was a different kind of light that morning coming through the window, more golden, the way it tends to be at the start of fall, when the sun no longer has all that force but still warms things slowly. Thomas came down first. He was wearing one of Nestor's shirts, the blue one, simple, button-down, the one Nestor wore on weekends when he was staying home and had nowhere to go, his favorite for just being. Thomas stopped in the kitchen doorway for a second when he saw me. He looked at the shirt, then looked at me. Our eyes met for an instant. He knew where that shirt had come from. Nothing was said. Then he came in, sat in his usual chair, on the same side he'd always sat since he was a boy eating lunch here. I poured his coffee without saying anything, the same way I always had. Talia came down shortly after. She was wearing the floral dress. She sat down at the table slowly, without looking directly at me. She took her cup in both hands, both, the way you do when you genuinely need the warmth, when you want to hold something solid, and looked at her coffee for a moment before drinking. I poured her coffee as if it were the most ordinary day in the world. Because sometimes that's how you take care of people, without ceremony, without keeping score, without expecting more than the moment is able to give back. The three of us sat in silence. The morning light came through the kitchen window with that gentle early morning brightness that doesn't last long, that you only appreciate when you're truly still. The little dog finished eating her food in the corner, came walking across the kitchen floor with those tiny steps of a small animal, sniffed at my feet with her cold, wet nose, and lay down pressed against my sneaker. Talia looked at her, then looked at me, and smiled, just a slight nod of the head without a word, just that. Nothing more was needed. I looked at the two of them that morning, my son in the clothes of a man he had lost too soon and missed every day, even without saying so, and my daughter-in-law in the dress I had sewn with my own hands, and that she had once, at a table full of people, called a rag, and I felt no anger. I felt no victory of any kind. I didn't feel that thing you imagine you'll feel when life makes the turn it was supposed to make. I felt what a mother feels when she sees that life has already delivered the message she never needed to say out loud. Thomas would answer for the mistakes he made while remaining free. He was cooperating with the authorities, had a long road ahead, and I didn't know how rough that road would be. I didn't know how long the two of them would stay in my house. I didn't know how Talia would rebuild herself. I didn't know what would happen with everything they had lost in a single day. I didn't know much. But that morning, with hot coffee and the sun coming through my kitchen window, I was fine. I always have been. Thank you for watching another story from The Voice. If this story touched you, if it stayed with you in some way, share it. Sometimes life tests us not to see if we can endure, but to show us what we are still capable of giving. Look at the people around you, not because they always deserve it, but because of who you are. If you'd like to hear more moving stories like this one, click on one appearing on your screen right now. Click and keep feeling with us.